All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to let a few more people into the room here. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about poultry biosecurity, and the state's vet's office is going to be giving us an update. Bob Gerlach and Sarah Coburn are our state vets. I'm going to hand it over to them. Bob or Sarah, which one of you guys would like to speak first?
I'll go ahead and start, Casey, and I'll go ahead and get ready to share my screen here so that people can see what we're doing. Yeah. How does that look? Can you see the presentation start?
Yeah, it looks great on my end.
Good. Okay. We've divided this up in two two sections. I'll go ahead and just give you a little bit of a background on the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus outbreak that's going on now, and a little bit about avian influenza in general, so you understand how the virus impacts poultry. But it can impact a number of other species. I mean, this obviously is a virus that's mostly, we're concerned with the outbreak in poultry, but avian influenza viruses can also impact horses, pigs, dogs, cats, and even marine mammals and ferrets. But our discussion is going to be just on influenza, avian influenza. And so when you look at the virus, it's a complex structure, and on the surface of it, there are these blue and red projections or proteins on the surface, and they help identify the strain of the virus. And so we divide avian influenza in two types, either highly pathogenic or low pathogenic. Generally, the highly pathogenic strain is the one that we're concerned about now in this country and spread to Alaska. But they're named, the influenza viruses are named according to these protein structures on the outside. So the H proteins can vary from 1 to 9, and the N's can vary from 1 to 16. So the current strain that's out in the lower 48 is an H5N1. And when we look at the waterfowl that are ones that seem to be carrying this virus and spreading it, and we'll go into that later, generally show no signs of illness. Unfortunately, or this is a unique strain, this particular H5N1, and we are seeing neurologic signs as well as mortalities in wild birds. So this is a little bit different. Most of these avian influenza viruses, they can be zoonotic, but most of them do not really pose a threat to human beings. So there's only kind of rare exceptions that we start to see this transfer as to being a public health problem or even an issue for food safety concerns. And how does the virus spread? It's generally either direct contact from bird to bird, from either secretions or as one bird coughs or sneezes, or contact with the bedding and fecal material. So you can have direct bird-to-bird contact or indirect contact, like we're talking about with the bedding material, or equipment, or somebody who walks through some contaminated feces and then has it on their boots and can transfer it to another farm that way, or even contaminated equipment. We can also see it spread through ingestion of infected food. And that's where we're seeing some reports in the lower 48 where there was a report just a few weeks ago of an eagle that was diagnosed with avian influenza. And the most likely source was that eagle harvesting and consuming an infected waterfowl. But like I said, our natural reservoir throughout the world are wild waterfowl, and especially dabbling ducks seem to be a very strong carrier and spreader of the virus. And so that's one of the reasons why U.S. Fish and Wildlife, USDA Wildlife Services, Fish and Game are focusing most of the surveillance, wildlife surveillance, on these dabbling duck species. So what are the signs of infection with the highly pathogenic avian influenza? In most cases, when it gets into poultry, it's going to cause oftentimes sudden death, and up to 90% mortality has been reported in some flocks in the lower 48. And this mortality can occur within as few as 48 hours of the virus being introduced into the flock. With the low pathogenic strains, like I said, they're generally, even in poultry, they're very mild symptoms, and oftentimes nothing's noticed except maybe a decrease in egg production. The concern with the low pathogenic strains is they can change and mutate into highly pathogenic strains, which can then obviously be a problem for poultry owners. So when we look at the other signs of high pathogenic avian influenza, if you don't see a large degree of mortality, you can just see a decrease in egg production or with production of really soft-shelled or misshapen eggs. With the birds that may show clinical signs with a lack of appetite or depression or lack of activity, they can have this twisting of the neck and act incoordinated or have tremors. You can find them nesting and with drooped wings on the ground and very little movement at all. So oftentimes it's something you're going to see pretty obvious as you look at your flock as you go out in the morning or in the evening to go ahead and feed them. It should be pretty obvious, some of these signs. We oftentimes see, because it's a respiratory virus, there's swelling of the head, and you'll have swelling of the eyes, the comb and wattles, but there'll also be swelling in the hocks and in the legs. And oftentimes really purple discoloration, or what they call cyanosis, this black or dark red coloration in the combs or on the legs. One of the most common signs that we see is the runny nose, discharge from the eyes, nose, coughing and sneezing, and occasionally we'll see diarrhea in some of the birds. So if you go back and there's a lot of different symptoms I described. So what you should be looking for, these are the classic signs: the swollen head, discolored comb, the discoloration on the hocks or the legs and the feet, the discharge of the head from the mouth or the nose or the eyes, and the swelling. A bird that's on the not moving around, hunkered down, can be tremoring or shaking, and head drooped and wings drooped, and the misshapen eggs. So the state does have a response plan, and we have every year done surveillance in both domestic poultry, and we also work with exhibitors like zoos and rehab centers. We do some wild bird surveillance as well, and coordinate with USDA Wildlife Services and USDA Wildlife Services and US Fish and Wildlife. We also have investigation of morbidity mortality events in both domestic poultry and in wild birds. That when we do the wild bird investigations, that's with our wildlife partners. We have plans for outreach, just like this this presentation, and we do outreach at 4-H groups as well as in the agricultural fairs, and that's where we do a lot of our surveillance at the fairs. And we also work with subsistence communities and hunters with the concern with avian influenza and the birds they may be harvesting. Part of the training that we do is with wildlife biologists, veterinary students, and veterinarians with respect to how to investigate a morbidity mortality event, what samples to collect, and what sanitation and disinfection that you should use if you suspect that there may be an outbreak of a disease going on. And we also work with our partners in both federal and state partners to exercise our response plans and go through a process that way. What I'm going to do now is kind of go through a little bit of a progression of when this virus entered North America, and it originated in, as you might expect, in Asia, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it was first detected in Canada in wild birds. There were some gulls as well as some wild waterfowl way up here in the Newfoundland, Nova Scotia area, or Newfoundland and Labrador province. And this was a little bit unusual because, like I said, most of the time we don't see symptoms in wild birds. And in this case, there was mortality. We had neurologic signs in these birds that they were not behaving right. They had a head tilt. They were swimming in circles and lack of coordination. And very soon after that first detection, there were detections in December in an exhibition flock, late December, and then another backyard flock in January. And then in February, there was one other backyard flock and 2 commercial flocks. And when you look at this, and as we discussed the detections in the United States, which are outlined here, it was first detected in the United States in South Carolina, not until mid-January. And that was in wild birds. Kentucky had the first reported case in poultry. And out of all these detections, as the timeline from early February till just today in Nebraska, these flocks are just not all commercial flocks. A majority of these are backyard flocks. So a lot of these producers, the big producers, haven't been immune. They have had some large operations impacted, but a majority of the outbreaks that we've detected in the United States, or the USDA has detected in the United States, have been in backyard flocks, which are most of the flocks that we see up here, and makes us a concern for wanting to get this information out to you folks. This is a map of the United States with the areas that have had either backyard or commercial flocks that have been impacted. And you can see the distribution, wide distribution, pretty rapidly from the last couple months. And like I said, so why is this happening? Well, we can know it's by wild bird dispersion of that virus and spreading throughout the country. And when you look at the right side of this diagram, these are the flyways, and of course these look like they're beautiful mapped out little routes. This is just a generalization. These routes are extremely diverse, and there's quite a bit of dispersion and intermixing of birds as they're flying up. So birds from the eastern part of the United States do come across the lower 48, as well as up into Canada and the United States. And so, like I said, this virus initially, this specific lineage that we've detected in the United States originated in Asia. And when you look at why all these outbreaks occur in Asia, the main reason is that we have such an incredible 9 billion people that are living in this area, and an incredible intensification of agriculture. And this map shows, this is the outbreak that occurred in 2005. And it shows the red marks is where the outbreaks occurred. And basically, we're just seeing a large population of people with an increased need for protein and food. And that's a very highly susceptible area for outbreaks, especially if there's not biosecurity and good management. When the United States, the USDA knew that this year was going to be a problem because this outbreak that's occurring now is almost mirroring what happened in 2014 and 15. And so when we look at that, and just to give you 1 or 2 slides to give you an idea, is that the outbreak occurred and started in Asia, and then with wild bird migration moved into Northern Europe and even down into Africa, and then spread up high into the Arctic. And this is exactly what happened in in 2001, or I'm sorry, 2021, with this current outbreak. As soon as they started to see detections up in the Arctic, there was a big concern that we are going to go ahead and see outbreaks in the United States. And so when you look at that outbreak, then in 2015, we start to see outbreaks in the northern Canada, as well as the Pacific Northwest, and then in through the Midwest, which is not noted on this map. But in that time period of 2014, 2015, and that is the last time that we had a highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak in the United States. In this case, these 2 years, there was over 50 million birds that were either died from as a result of the infection or had to be depopulated to go ahead and try to mitigate the spread of the virus. And if we're looking at just 2020 and 20 to 22, these years we've seen more outbreaks of avian influenza globally than we have ever seen in the last 10 years. And so this is a intensification of agriculture and increased exposure of wild birds to this virus has caused a tremendous problem. And in this outbreak alone, we are seeing over 54 countries have reported this particular strain of outbreak throughout the globe. Now, if we just look at, again, the map of the outbreak that occurred here that's occurring here in the United States, and now I'm going to show you a map of wild bird migrations, and you can actually go to this map site and see where the birds are migrating to on a day-to-day basis. But you can see these birds that are in these affected areas they're just starting to move north now, and as well as move west. We have seen, like I say, there have been detections in North or in South Dakota, and there was a detection of a bald eagle with this avian influenza strain up in British Columbia in Vancouver area. So the anticipation is that within a short time period, we're going to start to see cases up here. And so if you're interested in following the tracking of this, you can go on to USDA and their site and look at the daily outbreaks and detections throughout the country, and as well as get to areas or sites that will go ahead and not only just give you the current detections, but also give you information on what you can do and what are the resources that are available. And Dr. Coburn is going to go ahead and continue on and go through this process with you.
All right, let's see here. Give me one. Get my screen up too. Let's see here. All right. Okay. You guys, okay, looks like screen should be up with the flock health plan. All right. So I'm Sarah Coburn. I work with Dr. Gerlach in the state vet office. And there's lots of things that you're going to be considering as part of your overall flock healthcare for veterinary care and medical issues, husbandry and nutrition, animal welfare and housing, waste disposal related to chicken litter, and also in the unfortunate event of having any birds that have died. And then we are going to focus today just on this last piece, the biosecurity and preventing disease transmission. And the good thing about these sorts of management practices to prevent disease introduction is we're talking about avian influenza today, but really most of what I'm going to talk about is relevant for the ones that are much more common, like salmonella and other diseases of concern amongst flocks, even maybe like Merrick's or things like that. So there's biosecurity practices that can help minimize risk of transmission of diseases coming into your flock and then also transmitting within your flock. So biosecurity just refers to that set of practices that can decrease the risk of introducing a disease into the flock or spreading within the flock. And we always like to, from the standpoint of the state vet office, we always like to look at that bigger One Health perspective of really looking not at just protecting our birds, but protecting human health as well. Whoops, went the wrong way there. So how can diseases, viruses, pathogens, how can they get into your flock? Bob was just talking about migratory birds and their role as far as avian influenza goes. But much more commonly, what we're looking at too is just bringing in new birds to your flock, people that are going between flocks, or even if you have people congregating at a feed store and everybody's got their own chickens, and if everybody's wearing the same clothes they had at their farm, or driving the same vehicles to the same places without any cleaning step in between that or changing footwear in between, you can transfer things in the manure on your boots and in the dirt and things like that. Fomites is just a fancy word for surfaces and things that can harbor or just maintain a virus or a bacteria long enough for someone else to pick it up. So it could be feed dishes, it could be water buckets, could be boots. So just those inanimate objects that can be surfaces that multiple people or animals are going to touch and can transmit that way. And then rodents, we kind of forget about rodents. They're just a pest for a lot of us, but the reality is that they can also shed salmonella and bring in other bacteria into your flock. So we want to control rodents for lots of reasons. And then spread between birds, the fecal oral route, where things are shedding in the feces, and then it's in the ground and in the dirt, and other birds might be picking it up that way. Aerosol is just the respiratory and breathing in the same space and transmitting it that way. Back to the fomites again, and then mechanical vectors are just would be things like flies or insects that aren't actually important for the biology of the virus, but they're just picking things up on their little feet and moving it to another place on your farm or from one pen to another. That would be a mechanical vector. So day to day on the farm, there's a lot of pretty simple things we can do, and probably a lot of you that have chickens do these things already. Quarantine, so if you're bringing new birds into your flock, again, not specific to avian influenza or scary diseases, but just kind of the run-of-the-mill things. The stress of transporting an animal and bringing it to a new place. If they're harboring some kind of bacteria, they might look fine ahead of time, but then just the stress of being moved and in a new environment can actually be enough that whatever they might be carrying is going to break in those first couple of weeks. So if you have an opportunity to keep them separate until you can make sure everybody's healthy and everything looks good, so at least a couple of weeks, a lot of places recommend a full month, depending on your setup, how realistic that is, but definitely taking that into consideration if you get new chicks or if you get adult birds from another farm and bring them in. And then returning animals. So if you take birds to a show or you take them to some other event, it's a good idea to keep them separate from your home birds for a period of time to make sure that they weren't exposed to something. And in that period of 5 days or a week or 2 weeks after being exposed to other birds, that they might end up being sick. If you do just in your own flock have animals that are sick with respiratory illness or anything else that they seem off, if you can separate them from your healthy birds, that's the best case scenario. And then when you're working with your animals each day, if you can take care of the most vulnerable, like the chicks first, and your healthy animals first, and then move and take care of your sick animals or the ones that are just coming back from somewhere else. So if they do have something that can be transmitted, you're handling them last, you're handling their food last, and there's less risk of taking it into your pens with your healthy animals. And we've all heard so much about hand washing the last couple of years. That applies here too. Hand washing and some of the basic sanitation and hygiene are critical. And then dedicated footwear. So clothing overall, you want to be careful going between flocks. But boots that are directly picking up manure and dirt from your coop or from another coop. Best case scenario is just having dedicated footwear that stays on your farm. And best case scenario is that that dedicated footwear is used in animal areas and that that's not getting tracked through your house. So if those boots go in and out of the chicken coop and then they get left at the door or at the garage or wherever that boundary line is into your clean area, your clean house, that is one way to go about it. Another way is just to set up a boot bath that you walk through, or before you wear your boots off of that farm, that you actually do scrub them down and disinfect them. Or likewise, when you've worn them somewhere else, that you disinfect them before you walk back into your own chicken coop. And back to those fomites again, being careful about sharing equipment with another flock. Water buckets or feeders, if you are going to share any equipment, make sure that it's cleaned, disinfected first before it goes to another location. And then similarly with any sick animals or healthy animals, being careful to not use that equipment between pens when you're trying to protect your healthy birds in that situation. And these things don't have to cost a lot. You don't have to have a big infrastructure investment. Like I said, a boot bath, it could be a dilute bleach solution. It could be Virkon we commonly use here, with a little Rubbermaid tote or some other similar situation and a brush. This blue container is very similar to what we have at our house. If we're going to have people over, we'll have that out by the chicken coop, and hand sanitizer and a roll of paper towels stuffed in the handle there. And it's a pretty easy, simple way to just kind of keep any germs out by the chickens, not bring them into the house, and then again to separate between flocks. And then that's just a nice depiction, the picture with the boots on the left are just dirty boots. The boots in the middle were rinsed with water, and the ones on the right were actually disinfected. And you can see the bacterial plates on the bottom. Not surprisingly, the dirty boots have the most growth on that plate, and the ones on the right that have been disinfected didn't grow anything on that plate. So it's an effective step that can be taken. If you have visitors to the farm, I'd say most of us, I do have my own small flock at home. Most of us aren't going to have a big gate saying visitors, farm biosecurity. Depending if you're kind of in a commercial realm or you've got a lot of birds, you might have something like that with a boot bath there, or at least some notification of don't just drive onto the property, that you want some control of who's coming on. And most important, I found, is you just set expectations. So if you are going to have kids coming over, or you have family visiting, or people that are on your farm, what's the expectation for how you handle the animals, how you're going to clean your shoes when you come out, how you're going to wash your hands when you come out, especially young kids. I'm sure you've seen cases in the news over the past few years of kids that get salmonella. So you'll see the public service announcement, don't kiss your chickens, don't kiss the chicks. So really working with young children, hand washing compliance is much better when there's an adult that helps them with that. And again, changing clothes between farms. And if you have neighbors and they have chickens too, and the kids want to be going back and forth, just set up protocols that, hey, don't go in the coop by yourself, or make sure you check with me, and that you're there to help with that process. I know have seen some farms where they just have, 4 or 5 sets of boots that are by their coop. And if anybody goes in there that's not from their farm, they put on a set of those. So a few ways to go about it. Again, it doesn't have to be expensive, and they can be pretty simple things. And that's just with the domestic birds. So the other piece we want to consider is the domestic wildlife interface. And of course, there's predator issues. The one picture on the left there is a lynx that's came to our house a few weeks ago and has made a round through about once a week ever since then. Has not gotten any chickens, but is desperately trying. And we also, again, want to keep rodents out. They make a mess, they eat the food, and can also bring in some bacteria and pathogens. And then the wild birds, and again, predation issues like bald eagles would be common around here. Excuse me, and other predators as well. And then just back to that disease transmission issue from our birds to them, or from them to our birds. So we want to do some things to eliminate that contact with the wild birds. So one of the first things is you don't want to attract wild birds. So we've got food and we have water and all this great setup for our birds. If those things are bringing in outside birds, then you want to see what you can do to decrease that. If you've got waterfowl and you've got a pond out back, that's going to be one of your highest risk situations for avian influenza, where those wild birds and ducks can actually be shedding avian influenza in their feces. It can contaminate the environment and the water for a period of time. So if you have your own waterfowl that are using that in that same time frame, or anytime, you know, in the weeks after, that's going to be a higher risk situation. Bird feeders too, you know, between your own chicken feed that's out and then bird feeders, you know, you want the birds to come to the bird feeder and congregate there. That's not good from a bird health standpoint for our domestic birds. So if you do something like that, have it far away from where your chickens are and your domestic poultry. I would say best case scenario is maybe you just don't have that. Don't encourage them to come to your property. Limit free ranging. This is becoming an issue in the lower 48, where they have had cases of avian influenza in the past few weeks. And that's challenging when there's birds that are really used to free ranging. But if, you know, especially if you do have waterfowl that congregate in your area or that are coming through neighboring fields during that period of time, if you can limit that free ranging, just at least seasonally, to try and prevent a situation where there may be viruses in the environment that your birds could be exposed to. And then your coop and run construction. This picture is from Europe a few years ago with an avian influenza outbreak, and they were at the point of limiting even the little songbirds and any contact. And they were using kind of that, they call it debris netting, but that really fine netting to prevent even small birds from getting into the chicken coops. But, you know, for us, even just if you have areas of your coop that are attractive to other birds, or they perch a lot and they're pooping around your chicken coop, try to come up with something to eliminate that perch, or otherwise make it where it's not an easy place for them to be, to help decrease the potential contact between them. Feed and water, again, this is a pretty something you can try to work on it, having feed and water that are unavailable to wild animals. These PVC type of do-it-yourself feeders, you know, you can even get the cap to go over it at night and keep it covered up. Again, it keeps, you don't waste as much food. Rodents can't get into it and make a mess and waste it. And then it helps prevent that disease transfer and just deters other pests from hanging around. Making sure food's put away overnight and it's covered and in a secure location. Keeping the areas under the feeders cleaned up, and then the area around waters to try and keep that dry as well. And that's just, you know, one of the reasons we don't like mice around is the mess they make and ruining our good feed. And then the areas, just keeping them dry too, helps with respiratory issues and decreasing ammonia in the coop, and lots of good things that come about from just keeping those areas clean and dry. Shows and other events, especially if any of you help with barn management or fair management or things like that, you know, plan ahead and really think about what you can do to ensure a safe and healthy environment for those animals. Thinking about health checks and who's going to do that, maintaining separation between species. So ideally having the turkeys in one area and having the waterfowl in a separate area and your chickens in another area. Take advantage of that opportunity to educate the public as far as, you know, not eating and drinking in the barns and not having pacifiers and not handling, you know, not handling the animals without the owner being there and monitoring that situation. Hand washing comes up in so many contexts, but definitely for shows and other events for the bird owners, judges, and then the public that's coming through the building as well. And in the unfortunate situation where you do have an illness or a mortality at a fair or a show, you want to think about that ahead of time. Who's your contact person? How would the owner be notified, and what's going to happen in that situation to follow up and make sure there's not other birds that are affected. And again, if you are taking your animals to a show, when you bring them back, having that separation upon coming back to your flock, and maintaining quarantine, and just making sure that everybody's healthy before you introduce them back into your home flock. So reporting sick birds in our state, if you notice any illness or mortality in your flock, especially if it's anything that's consistent with the signs that Dr. Gerlach described earlier. With avian influenza, that's one we're very concerned about. Certainly contact your vet if you have a vet in your area that works with poultry. We are available as well to consult with veterinarians and owners. If you're able to, keep the carcass, and it can be submitted for necropsy or testing for avian influenza. We do surveillance on all the birds that come through our office, but we are available to do gross necropsies and take a look and see if it's something that's consistent with an infectious disease, or if there's some other issues that might be come up for that bird, and can helps with our surveillance testing, and then also can help you with your flock management and knowing what's going on in your flock. And again, disposing of properly. So you generally do want any mortality, you want mortalities to be not available for predators to come eat, or the neighborhood dog, or for other birds to get into them. So whether that's burial or disposal to landfill, or if they are brought to our office, we do dispose of them here. So just making sure they're not on the landscape and potentially could spread something to another animal. So a couple of resources, especially in the context of avian influenza that we're discussing today. You can always check out our Office of the State Veterinarian webpage, and we'll try to keep that updated with what's going on with the avian influenza outbreak. The USDA link is directly to avian influenza, and that's where you can find the updates on other states that have been affected. The other ones I listed are just some good general health resources. The Chicken Health Handbook is a nice one for a lot of information in it. It's easy to follow. The Chicken Chicks, a blog, she does a lot of good posts. She works with a poultry veterinarian, so she's generally got good information on poultry health issues. And the Poultry One guide as well is a good website. And I forgot to put up our contact information, but we can certainly provide that, and Casey has that as well. So that's what I've got for you guys. I think we've got a few minutes for questions if there's anything that Dr. Gerlach or I can answer. Thanks.